Welcome to Bump Set Chat, the podcast where volleyball professionals come on and share their stories, experiences, and advice. And today I am super excited. From the Big Ten Network, I have Emily Ehman. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Glad we can make this happen. Really pumped.
Totally. All right, the way we start things off was to do a few random questions. So are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, easy one. Favorite movie?
Oh gosh, School of Rock. It was like one of the first movies I just remember laughing my butt off to, and even to this day, I feel like I know every word.
Excellent. All right, second one. Coolest place you've ever played hide and go seek?
Oh my gosh. Oh, actually, I have a good answer for this. So, my uncle used to coach for Indiana basketball, and we were in I think I was in fifth grade, and I had two cousins the same age as me and my brother. He's 3 years older, and we used to play hide and seek in Assembly Hall, and we were allowed all in Indiana locker room and literally anywhere. So yeah, I kind of grew up doing that. It was really fun.
Excellent. All right, last one. Favorite home cooked meal?
My mom makes a really good meatloaf, and I feel like meatloaf is a hot take to like, but I love it, and she makes the best one.
And does she do anything special about it, or it's just because it's made by mom?
Like I, I feel like maybe special. I think the sauce is really sugary, which I'm sure is why I like it so much. But no, that's definitely my favorite thing when I go home. I always want her to make that.
All right. Well, welcome to the podcast. And, where are you from?
I'm from Bloomington, Indiana. I went to school at Northwestern though, so I have been in Chicago for almost 10 years.
Nice. And when did you first discover volleyball?
Ooh, I first discovered volleyball in the backyard of my cousin, the same cousin that I used to play hide and go seek with. She's 1 year older than me, and I've just always looked up to her. And she played volleyball with a bunch of her friends. And at the time, I was in gymnastics and cheerleading and track and all of that. So I had never touched a volleyball. And I remember she asked to go play pepper in the backyard, and I remember just falling in love with it right away. I mean, from the second we started, I was like, this is really, really fun. Ended up joining a YMCA league and then joining club and really just fell in love with it right away.
Excellent. And, after all these years, what is the hook that, volleyball is still such a huge, important piece of your life?
Yeah, I mean, my whole life is volleyball. I mean, that's what my job is. It's what I enjoy watching, what I enjoy talking about all the time. I think the biggest thing for me that sets volleyball apart from really other sports is that I genuinely feel like volleyball is the biggest team sport because you have three touches on both sides. One person can't completely take over. It's great if you have a really good superstar, but it's not the same as, basketball or football, where if you have a superstar, they can kind of take over in that way. It really is such a team sport. And I think the way that the game has evolved into how it is today, the athletes are so dynamic and athletic, yet incredibly graceful and just so much fun to watch. So I think, as the athletes and the teams just continue to get better and better and the game continues to evolve, it's just going to get more and more fun to watch.
Nice. And in growing up, you were just talking about some of the sports you played. So clearly you played multiple sports.
Yeah.
How important was that to your sort of development down the road to, improve your volleyball skills and eventually play at Northwestern?
Oh my gosh, I think, playing multiple sports when I was growing up was the reason that I think I got to where I am. I don't think I would have been as athletic or had, just a lot of those fundamental pieces that you gain when you're a child. I started in ballet, and then I did dance, and then I did gymnastics for 10 years. I think that was kind of the biggest reason how I developed how to jump really high or things like that. So, I did pretty much every sport in the book. Even up until high school, I was a high level track athlete. I thought about doing volleyball and track in college. I had some offers to do so, but I really think it helped just cross training as well. I mean, in high school, I would miss club tournaments for really big track meets. And to me, that was really important. And I will say I was lucky enough to have a club coach that understood that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I know, especially nowadays, a lot of coaches that aren't okay with athletes playing multiple sports. But I think it's so important for development. And any high level athlete that you ask these days, they will always tell you that that is so, so important, especially growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you mentioned you played club ball. How important was playing club to you getting, building up your skill set and also eventually, getting to play at Northwestern?
Yeah, club is so important. I mean, I do stress the importance of getting involved in multiple sports, but, club is such a grind, but it's really important. You play your middle school or high school team in the fall, and then it's club from really December until about June or so. And that's when you get to see the players that are, kind of your same skill level, and you get to play a lot of, teams that are around your skill level too. It's obviously it differs from state to state, and I was lucky to play in a state where we had pretty good volleyball in Indiana. But I know a lot of, high schools across the country, the competition isn't very hard. If you're a really good team, you might just roll through the entire season. Or if you're the best on your team, it might be difficult for you to get better during a high school season. So playing at a high level club, or at least a club where you have athletes that are up to your caliber of play, is so important, because that's the development period.
Yeah.
That's where you're getting better. Ideally, if you have a good club coach that's teaching you good fundamentals, teaching you about the game. I think the biggest thing that I learned was my takeaways from, club or high school. Like, the biggest things that I felt most important taking on to college was my volleyball IQ.
Yeah.
What shots in what situation, how to scout players, what it means to start in rotation one, or just small things that I think a lot of athletes learn during that club season, because high school is really about winning. It's really
Yeah.
important to get those wins in your belt. Whereas club, that's not necessarily the goal. I mean, yes, the goal is to win, but it's really to develop you as a volleyball player.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some people look at, I've talked to a bunch of parents and just experiencing the club aspect of things. Some people are worried about play time, but it's really that coaching
Yeah.
time that's the really important piece of club.
Yeah, I mean that it's a huge piece. And I mean, I played Division One Big Ten volleyball, and I was on a twos team at Circle City in Indiana. So for me, it was really important to not only get that playing time, but that development time. And for me, that was really important to do so on the court. And I think there's so many crazy club parents and people that want to chat with coaches all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I made sure for myself that I was the one having those conversations, because I felt that was important for me, not only as a player, but just, as like a human, and to develop into an adult that can have those conversations. But I really did value that playing time on the court, because I wanted to make it to the next level. So for me, that was, I had been, every year I was offered a position on the ones team, but it was either a DS position, or I was, kind of a backup. And I could have taken that, and, maybe it would have been good development sitting on the bench, but I really wanted that playing time. So
Yeah.
I played on a twos team, and it worked out because, playing Big Ten Division One volleyball. So it's all about, what situation you're in, and figuring it out. But I do urge, like, anyone who's maybe listening, whose child plays club, or if you play club, have those conversations with your coaches, and don't let your parents handle them.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, our high school coach is the same way,
Yeah.
institutes, if the parent, if you have questions, ask your child. Your child is your path of communication to me. And that makes sense, because it gives them responsibility and makes them not afraid to talk with their coach, talk with an
Yeah.
adult.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. And that's what happens when you get to college, whether, you're playing a sport or not. You have to have those conversations with your professors. Once you start a job, you're having those conversations with your bosses. Those aren't conversations that your parents are having with them. So as early as you can develop that, I think is just so important.
Yeah. And I understand you were a libero.
Yeah, I was an outside all my life until I got to college. And then, yeah, I was a libero for 4 years at Northwestern.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that's an interesting thing I've discovered, is a lot of, like, players who played in high school or whatnot, in a 5'8", 5'9" range, they're the
Yeah.
outside hitter. But then when they realize that, maybe to play college, I got to be 6 feet. Not all the time, but, then you see that libero, a lot of outside hitters
Yeah.
who were liberos.
Yeah, I think, it happens all the time. Growing up, one thing I really prided myself on was ball control. Like, I was a really good outside that could play six rotations, and that was kind of what I did. So it wasn't a crazy transition for me. I will say it was a less fun transition for me, because I was a hype woman, and the best way to do that for me was getting a big kill or hyping my team up, and I did it, I did it the best I could at Northwestern. But yeah, I mean, I'm 5'8", like I was never gonna hit at that level, unless you're a superstar, like a, Chloe Chacoin, who's now at Louisville, or Charity
Right.
Loop, who graduated from there. Like, there are a few players that are studs that are 5'8", maybe 5'9", but it takes a really special talent to make it at that level if you're that tall.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of the, being that hype person, I had a Micah Christensen on a while ago, and he was
Yeah.
talking about, he was an outside hitter. He loved being outside hitter, because when you walk into a gym, somebody hitting that ball, you're snapping heads. He says, as a setter, I'm not snapping heads. So he was reluctantly going from outside hitter to setter, but it worked out for him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely crushing it. For sure worked out for him, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of a libero, what is describe the heart of a libero, the
Oh my gosh.
persona of a libero?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the best liberos that I like to watch are the fiery ones. I like when they're hyping their team up. I think it's, you kind of go one of two ways. You either have a libero that is like the craziest person on your team that's hyping everyone up, that's getting, more hyped in the middle that just got the block, or you have a libero that's like very steady, that's going to keep everyone kind of in check. And I will say most high level liberos are like that. When you think of a Justine Wongerantes or a Morgan Hens in the USA gym, those are players that are like very steady Eddie. I like watching the ones that are getting their teams fired up. I think, it can go both ways, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think the libero is one of the most selfless positions because you rarely get the recognition. You're doing so much work back there, managing the serve receive, telling people where to go, what seams you're taking, controlling the defense in the backcourt, and it kind of goes unnoticed. So it's a position that you definitely have to be incredibly selfless to play.
Yeah. 100% agree. I had Mason Briggs on a while ago, and he goes, like, as an outside hitter, you can block, you can hit, you can serve. As a libero, I've got one job to do. I can't suck at it. And it's just,
Mhm.
he made a really, really great point about that.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure too. You're serve receiving your defense, and that's kind of all you got.
Yeah, absolutely. And now after high school, you ended up at Northwestern. What made you pick Northwestern?
Oh my gosh, I fell in love with it right away. My mom's family is from Northwest Indiana, so it was about an hour outside Chicago. So I grew up coming to Chicago all the time, every summer, every winter. It's my favorite city in the world. And Northwestern was always kind of my dream school. Once I realized that I wanted to go into sports broadcasting, which was pretty young, I was about 10 years old when I
Oh,
figured
wow.
that out. Yeah, so I when I looked at schools, I really only looked at schools that had good journalism programs. So Northwestern being in Chicago, having one of, if not the best journalism school in the country, it was at the top of my list. So I went to a camp. I fell in love with it right away, and my high school coach had a connection with the coach I got recruited by at the time, and I went on a visit, fell in love right away, canceled all my other visits. They offered me a walk-on position, and I took it right there.
Nice. And now, how was that first year? Because there's so much pressure on a college student. Add in D1, add in volleyball as a fall sport, moving away from home. Probably there's so much pressure on. How was it for you?
Honestly, for me, I had a really good experience, and I know that's not typical for, people going right into college. There's all those things you listed, and then, you add on the fact that when you're playing a sport in college, everyone on that team was the best on their high school team. They were the best on their club team. You're used to playing, as many minutes or as much of the game as you possibly can. That's what you're used to.
Right.
Then you go to a gym and you're automatically bottom of the totem pole. So it's that like mental toughness that you have to have of, okay, let me, work really hard to earn that spot. Or it's, okay, let me accept that this is my role this season and work really hard for next year to earn a spot on the court or
Yeah.
make sure I'm pushing my teammates to make them better. So it's really that mindset switch of, okay, I'm not the best player on the court right now. Some players are as a freshman, but that's very rare. Definitely not the case for me. I came in and, best of my club team, best of my high school team. I was by far, one of the worst players in the gym, but I was okay with that.
Yeah.
So for me, my mindset switch was, okay, I'm going to be the loudest in the gym. I'm going to push everyone the hardest. I'm going to win every sprint that we do. I'm going to be best in the weight room. Kind of that mindset of,
Yeah.
really being the team hype woman.
Right.
And that was kind of my role for 3 years at Northwestern. But especially that first year, it was definitely an adjustment coming into a school that has some of the hardest academics in the country. You're playing in the Big Ten. We weren't a very good team, so we're losing,
Oh,
so many games. That didn't help. But I will say, I leaned on the fact that I loved my teammates. Like I was so lucky that like those were all my sisters right away. We
yeah.
got along incredibly well. I was in love with my coach. He is the greatest guy in the world. So even through all of the struggles that we had as a team, and maybe, when class got hard or whatever it was, I always had people to lean on, which was really big for me, along with my family,
Yeah.
who's, always there for me as well.
Nice. Yeah, something you brought up on is, the mental aspect of that, that freshman, like you said, they're the alpha, they're coming in, they're the
Yeah.
starter. And now adjusting whether it's a role position or not playing at all. That's, a lot of effort is going to be required by the coaching staff to make sure they don't mentally lose that player.
Yeah, well, and especially nowadays, I mean, when I was in school, it was 2016 to 2020, so we didn't have the transfer portal and all of that.
Right.
So the work that coaches have to do now to manage the emotions of players and just manage their happiness. Like, hey, I know you're not playing right now. Like, what do you want your role to be? How can we get there? And like, how can I help you do that? I think it's so important to have check-ins with your players because, nowadays, if you have a frustrated player that feels like they should be on the court, like they're probably just going to leave next year.
Right.
But a lot of that is also culture. Like, can you develop a culture where you want to develop players and those players are okay with maybe sitting the bench for 1, even 2 years before they see the court? And then just a culture of like, are these good people? Are they people you want to be around
Right.
8 hours a day? Because the reality is like that's what it is.
Yep. Absolutely agree. And now, something, I've noticed with volleyball is the bench. Oh my God, they are so in it. They are
Yeah.
so hyped up. And, there's a rumor that you were doing backflips on the bench. I've never
Yep.
seen that before.
Yeah. I will just say, I obviously have been to a lot of volleyball games over the past few years calling them, and hands down, my bench at Northwestern it's not even close. We are like way above anyone that I've ever seen. And again, that was like, when I came in, I was like, we will have the best bench in the country. We're going to be the most hype. We're going to be the most fun. We're going to have cheers for everything. We didn't win all the time, but like when we were doing well, it was so much fun. Yeah, I mentioned I did gymnastics for 10 years. So anytime anyone in our team got a block, I would do a backflip. And I remember there were games like if we had a really good defensive game and we're just racking up block after block, I remember after games, I swear I was more tired than people on the court just from cheering. One time I remember like threw out my shoulder, like we were getting after it on the bench. It was really fun.
Nice. And, once just going back on the whole role of that bench player, they're so important. I had Matt Ulmer on, who's now at Kansas, and he was telling me about one of his players at Oregon, Reyes. She's like 5'1" or
Yeah.
something, but she's the hype woman. And he goes, Barry, she provides so much valuable information to the players when we have a timeout or whatnot. And volleyball is just great that way.
Yeah, and it's so great because when you're on the bench, maybe you're not playing, maybe you're the hype woman, or maybe, maybe that's not your personality. So what you can do is, watch out on the court. Anytime someone comes off, tell them what you're seeing. And that was something that we try to do all the time. Like it was kind of set up positionally. So I would tell, the other liberos what I was seeing on the court. Like maybe they needed to be one step to their right or to the left. Or it's so helpful when players come off or during a timeout to really be dialed in and to contribute in that way if you're not actually on the court contributing.
Yeah. And now, what were some of your highlights from your time at Northwestern?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I have so many. I had the best experience. Like I didn't even play until my senior year. I mean, I sat the bench my first 3 years and then really only played senior year because we had a ton of injuries. So I ended up starting most matches. But I mean, I had a blast even though I wasn't on the court all the time. Like those are my girls. I had so much fun with them. I think like probably two memories stick out the most. It was my senior night. We were playing Illinois. They were ranked, I think, 17th in the country. We hadn't beat a ranked opponent my entire four
Oh,
years at
wow.
Northwestern, and we ended up beating them in four. And it was just so much fun. Like such a fun way to go out with in a career like that with like so many people just surrounded that I just absolutely adored and loved, and that was so much fun. And then there was another one where I think it was my junior year. I might have been my senior year. We were busing back from Indiana, so like a 4 hour bus ride. It was an 8 p.m. Eastern game, so we end at like 10 p.m. We're busing back. We're supposed to get home at 2 a.m. Our bus breaks down halfway through, like exactly
Oh, wow.
halfway, 2 hours in, and there's if you've driven on I-65, there's literally nothing in this area. Like there wasn't even bathrooms. Like
Oh,
we
God.
we pulled over. We were told we had to wait for a bus coming from Chicago. So another 2 hours we had to wait. And it was like 90 degrees out. We're all just like sweating. So we go outside and we start playing games for hours. And we had the best time. This was also it was like right when TikTok started.
Yeah.
Everything was all just dancing. So we did like so many fun TikTok dances outside. And I mean, we had an absolute blast. I think we got home at 5 a.m., but it was like one of the most fun nights ever.
Nice. And now looking back on your college experience, what do you miss most?
Oh, I talk about this all the time with my teammates. I miss just being in a locker room.
Yeah.
Like, you go through sports your whole life and you have built-in friends. You are with them for 5, 6 hours a day. I lived with, 8 other of my teammates. So you're constantly with your best friends, people that feel like family to you. Their biggest support system, biggest hype people, confidants, like everything. And I just miss being in a locker room. Like whether we had a good practice and we're just hype about it after, or honestly, sometimes it was more fun when we had a really bad practice or like we had to go run sprints and you kind of like commiserate about it in the locker room. Like there's something about group misery that like brings people together. Um, I really miss that aspect of it though, just like playing on a team and with people all the time. And I will say like I do get that a little bit in my job. You know, I work with the play-by-play who I feels like we're in like a partnership
Hmm.
and it does feel like a team when I work when I call matches, but it just there's nothing like being in a locker room with
Yeah.
people that are all your best friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, did you have any pregame rituals? Did you have to have a certain meal, a nap before a game?
I always had the same person braid my hair before every game. Other than that, like, I mean, we always had a massive dance party in the locker room beforehand. And like, well, some people were getting focused. Like I was the psycho that like was just bugging everyone. But it was such a blast. Like our pregame in the locker room was a dance party. It was so much fun.
Nice. And now, when you were playing, you had a couple of bad plays. What was your sort of go-to to reset?
Yeah, I will say when I was playing, I had a pretty quick memory. I think it's really important in volleyball to be able to flush stuff right away. Like it doesn't matter if you got a huge kill, it doesn't matter if you just shanked a pass. Like you got to reset for the next point, which is kind of what makes volleyball fun. Is the game can change so quickly
Hmm.
and the time doesn't run out. Like you can be down 24-2 and like you could theoretically come back.
Yeah.
So I think just making sure to tell yourself like next play, whether that's I had players that like did something specifically. Some people would go like touch the sideline
Yeah.
or, like I had a girl that would like fix her headband or things like that where it can center you.
Hmm.
For me, I would just always, after every play, whether it was good or bad, just say, next play, let's go.
Nice. And now, if you could, what advice would you have for freshmen that are coming in next fall?
Yeah, I think knowing that it might not be amazing right away, and that's completely normal. But I do think it's really important to like stick it out through the year and really see if that situation is right or not for you. And if it's not, that's totally fine. But it might just take an adjustment period because even if you look at your non-athlete friends or, maybe people you knew in high school, they're in college now, like not everyone has an amazing freshman year. Honestly, most people don't. I had so many friends that wanted to transfer after their freshman year, at places all over the country that end up sticking it out. And we're so thankful they did. But sometimes it's really hard coming in freshman year. And I think the biggest thing that I would say is if you are struggling with anything, even like minimally, talk to someone about it, whether that's a friend, a parent, if that needs to be a therapist, like it's an awesome resource to have. But just knowing that it might not be all like sunshine and butterflies,
Yeah.
but it'll get better. And there's as long as you have someone to talk it through with, then that's huge.
Nice. And then after college, broadcast journalism was your next play, next
Yeah.
space. And you started, I think I was reading or heard or watched Big Ten Volley Talk was sort of, you
Yeah.
started your own business to sort of market yourself out to open the doors.
Yeah. I graduated in March of 2020. So it was like the worst possible time to try to break into sports. I didn't have a reel put together because my plan at that time was use the spring to kind of do that of my senior year. Obviously, the world shuts down. No
Mm-hmm.
sports are happening. No one's hiring. And so I knew that that was going to be a time where I had to figure it out myself and create my own opportunities because they weren't going to be given to me. They honestly weren't even available at that time. So yeah, I started a web show called Big Ten Volley Talk where I would interview Big Ten volleyball athletes, alumni, coaches, really anybody around the sport. And I would do interviews and then I would spice up some B-roll and just started posting them. And I knew from playing in the Big Ten and just playing volleyball that there was such a massive volleyball following that hadn't been tapped into yet. This was at a time where the term digital host didn't exist and there wasn't a TikTok, there weren't people just creating content
Yeah.
around sports at that time. So this is also pretty new to social media, the concept of like talking about sports in this way and interviewing athletes in that way. It was especially new for volleyball because no one had been doing that.
Right.
So it was kind of a niche that I knew existed that I was able to tap into, through the connections that I had and just from having played the sport. It started gaining a pretty big following right away. And And then I just started pitching myself to people. I pitched it to volleyballmag.com and they picked it up as a digital series. From there, I pitched myself to Athletes Unlimited, who was starting their first volleyball season. It was the winner of 2021 to be their digital host. And
Yeah.
and they took me up on it, I think, because they didn't have a lot of money to offer. And I was like, great, I will literally just come and do it. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I did that, and then I pitched myself to Big Ten Network to cover what was then the spring tournament, the NCAA tournament in 2021. And I kind of just kept pitching myself to people and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's how I can fill a void on your platform or your network or whatever it is. And this is like why I'm the perfect person to do it. And, from there, it kind of snowballed into the career that I have,
Yeah.
calling volleyball games and doing digital content.
Nice. Now, how hard was it those early years of
Yeah.
figuring out what your value was worth that you were pitching to these organizations who had never even thought of this perhaps before?
Yeah, I think it was definitely hard because one, I wasn't really making money. Luckily, I had parents who were helpful and would support me. And I
Yeah.
also had a part-time job at a news network that I was working for before the pandemic started. So that was helpful that I had like somewhat of an income and I did have help from my parents.
Nice.
Otherwise, I definitely couldn't have made it happen. But I think just mentally knowing like having a goal and having baby steps to get there. Like I knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. But I knew it was something that I was really passionate about was being in this industry. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Coming out of college, I thought that I wanted to do what every other female did in the industry, which was be a host,
Yeah.
like on Sports Center, or be a sideline reporter. And I had experience in both of those things in the first year or two after college, and kind of realized that wasn't really my passion. And calling volleyball was what I wanted to do. But out of college, like I didn't even know that was a job.
Right.
So it kind of changed a little bit, but I always knew I wanted to be in the industry and I wanted to be successful in the industry. So just continuing to say yes to literally every opportunity, and to just kind of figure it out, no matter what sport I was covering,
Yeah.
whether I knew anything about it or not, but just consistently saying yes, and being available and just grinding. Like, I mean, this job is insanely exhausting. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gone all the time. I don't get a lot of sleep. I don't get to see my loved ones, but it's worth it. Like I love this job more than anything.
Yeah, yeah. A few minutes ago, you talked about the pandemic, and as I was like, putting together, questions and whatnot, I saw a video of you interviewing. I think it was for Athletes Unlimited, the social
Yeah.
distance spacing with masks on. I was like, oh my
Yep.
god, that's such a wild, weird time.
It was so weird. And this was, I will say, so during that was spring, I think it was February 2021. I had no experience doing any of this. I had never actually done an interview. I'd maybe done one in college, like in person sit downs. And
Yeah,
remember when I pitched myself to AAU to be their digital host, I didn't really know what the role was. And I kind of, they had an idea and I had an idea, and I ended up doing so much and got so many reps. But yeah, it was like pre-game sit down interviews, post-game interviews after games. I hosted a weekly show. I did all of these things. I didn't know what I was doing, and it was during a pandemic. So
right.
like, yeah, I'm sitting 6, 7 feet across from people interviewing someone in a mask, and it was a whirlwind. But yeah, I mean, it honestly helped because then everything after then was pretty easy to
Yeah,
figure out.
absolutely. Yeah. And, was there a turning point where all of a sudden, things clicked, things started to, line up one after another, like a certain couple of events you did?
Yeah, I think, my first real, probably my second year with BTN. My first year, I really didn't know what I was doing calling games. This was the fall of 2021. I think I had like 5 or 6 games, and most of them were from our studio in Chicago. So we would be in these tiny little rooms with like 5 different monitors calling games.
Yeah.
And it's hard to call a game when you're not actually there, which I'm like surprised that I figured it out, decently quickly. But I remember, someone saying like, "Hey, you're pretty good at this," and I'm listening back, and I'm like, "I'm horrible at this. Like, what are they talking about?" But I ended up getting a broadcast coach that next winter. So it was the winter of 2022, and I started working with her. And I remember from then on, like, just getting so much better at my craft so quickly, and headed into the fall of 2022. I remember I started getting bigger games, and I had the Cole Center match for Wisconsin. It was the first time they had played in there. They broke an attendance record. And I remember being like, okay, they trust me to be on these really big games. That
Right.
must mean that I'm doing a pretty good job. So I think that for me, I think was a turning point of they think that I'm good at this. So I guess I'm fine at this. And from then on, I started getting bigger and bigger opportunities. And I mean, I say yes to pretty much any game that I possibly get. That I think last season was like 36 matches during a 3 month period, which is obviously a
Wow.
ton. I love the grind, and yeah, I think that was probably the turning point for me was fall of 22, getting that Cole Center match and really thinking like, okay, they think I'm good at this.
Nice. And then over the years, who were your mentors or role models that really helped guide you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, one of them, I had a conversation with her in, I think, college for the first time. Her name is Maggie Mcquen. She is a basketball analyst for literally everyone. I mean, BTN, ESPN, like literally any entity that exists that covers women's basketball, she does. She went to Northwestern. She played basketball there. She's been a sports broadcaster for probably 10 years or so now. And I got connected with her and we just clicked instantly. Like, she was so incredibly helpful. She had done kind of every job in the industry already. So any question that I had, she had already experienced and could answer and help me out. And she was great connecting me with people and just so incredibly helpful, especially early on in my career, even navigating like how to negotiate for myself and have those
Hmm.
conversations, which was something I never had even thought of in this industry. Which has been incredibly beneficial. Like to this day, I don't have an agent. I do all the negotiating myself. I honestly kind of like doing it.
Yeah,
And I don't have to pay someone 10%, which is really nice. But
absolutely.
it was huge for me early on to have someone who could guide me through those conversations, and really help me out in a business sense as well.
Yeah. And now in this role you have, the multiple roles that you do, what are some of the more difficult or challenging things that you have to deal with?
Yeah, I will say working in volleyball is really fun because I don't have to deal with a lot of things that other sports I think have to deal with. Like, for example, like fans of football and men's basketball are really mean, and I love that I don't have to deal with that. In
Hmm.
general, volleyball fans are pretty nice.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy that. I mean, honestly, the most challenging part of my job is just the travel. Like
Right.
during the fall, I'm gone 4 or 5 days a week. So you don't get into a routine. You're living out of a suitcase constantly. Like just trying to find time to get outside or go on a walk or work out is really difficult. Also just, not seeing your friends and family for like pretty
Hmm.
long stretches at a time. Like last fall I moved in with my cousin in August and she's like, this is crazy. I'm not going to see you basically for 2, 3 months. But yeah, I think that's the hardest part is just being gone a lot. But I do try in the winter to have more downtime, not take as many games, and like actually be where I am in Chicago and get to travel a little bit for fun with some of my friends too.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about the volleyball fans, I think it echoes to the volleyball community as a whole.
Yeah.
There's no it's a sport that you can play throughout your whole life, whether with a co-ed, and since starting this podcast, I've had some of the top level people in volleyball, Eric Shoji, Micah Christensen,
Yeah.
Jordan Larson. And these are, normal, humble,
Yeah.
just really people that are just really grateful to be able to
Yeah.
playing at the level, and now especially with like things like the PVF and Love for the girls to come home and play. It's such a volleyball is just such a great community in a whole.
It's so cool. I mean, having worked in other sports, volleyball is really special, because the community is so tight. And like you said, these high level athletes that people look up to, that like person like Jordan Larson, who's like a volleyball god, the most normal, humble person ever. Like, you'll see her when she was on the Nebraska staff, I would see her at every practice. We'd sit down and chat for like 10 minutes. I mean, these people are such normal people, even though they're incredibly high level athletes, like as high as you can possibly get.
Right.
But it's so much fun being in this world because everyone is so great. And on my side of it as a broadcaster, all of these athletes and coaches really want to be covered. I've covered football and men's basketball, and that is not the case. They don't want to do any interviews with you.
Right.
They kind of want nothing to do with you, which I understand. They do it all the time, but it's really cool to be working in volleyball and really women's sports because all of these athletes and coaches really crave that and want to push the sport forward, which is really fun to be a part of.
Yeah. And now, you've become one of the faces of volleyball. What do you think has been sort of the keys to success? Obviously, it's the grind that you're doing, the constant, just, all the effort that you put into it.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think that's the biggest thing. For me, I decided about 2 years ago, I kind of wanted to not stop, but sort of pull back on a lot of other sports that I was doing because I wanted to focus on volleyball. I mean, I want to be the volleyball person. Like when you think of college volleyball, you think of me, and I want to be the kind of go-to all-stop shop for everything volleyball. So, yeah, I mean, it's a grind. I try to have my hands in everything that I can, whether it's, college volleyball, professional volleyball in the US, international volleyball, being a presence on social media. There's a lot of different aspects that go into it and, different jobs as well, like working for so many different networks and different leagues and all of that. I think honestly, the biggest thing is just the grind, like making sure that if I see an opportunity or a space that I haven't been in yet, to connect with someone in that space and
Yeah.
make sure that I can find a way into that space. And I mean, it's worked so far, so we'll see.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point there, being the social media, leveraging your social media. That's something
Yeah.
the traditional broadcast people don't really go into. And now you having to, make sure you got your TikToks, your shorts, your reels, manage all that aspect. That's a lot of work in itself, doing the editing and just staying on top of all of those things.
I will say most of the digital stuff I do is for Big Ten Network, and we do have editors. So
Nice.
I did used to edit a lot of the videos, but we have a whole team now to where I can just record it and send it off, and they do
Awesome.
it. So that's really big for me. I think if I didn't have them, it would be honestly, I don't think I would have time to do it. I've thought about starting a volleyball show or podcast, and I'm like, I don't have time to edit all this stuff. So yeah, it's I think that's one thing is people don't really understand that social media is a huge grind. Like I have my friends ask me all the time, like, oh, do you want to be like an influencer and like post content all the time? I'm like, no, it's like the most exhausting thing ever to
Yeah.
like record a reel and edit a reel, like even just post one a day. Like I honestly, it's not that I don't want any part of that because I am in that world, but to make a significant amount of money off of that. You have to like really be bought in. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at the TV side of it. I
Yeah.
do what I can on social. And luckily, I'm tied to a network that does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. But it's definitely a grind for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Something with, and the other aspect with social media and being a content creator and whatnot, one aspect people don't realize is you're dealing with people on the internet. I'd like to
Oh
think
gosh,
because
yeah.
it's the volleyball community that, for the most part you don't, but I'm sure you have to deal with some negativity that comes along. And how do you sort of block that out or, wall that?
Yeah, I think for me, I have the mindset of I'm not taking criticism from someone I would never take advice from. So I know that if I'm on a game and I also like I say stupid stuff all the time on games. Like sometimes I'll say something and I'm like, what just came out of my mouth? So like I get that sometimes I'm saying, dumb things, but
But
it's
you're a
never
human.
totally. Yeah, it's like that happens on every broadcast. Everyone says dumb stuff. You're never going to be perfect. I'm going to stumble on my words. It happens multiple times every single broadcast. So, I think when I get messages or DMs or whatever it is, like I put it aside. I don't think I've ever read something that has really affected me because I know like these people have no idea what I do
Mm-hmm.
for a living. They don't know how my job works. And if they think they can do it better, they are more than welcome to take my job.
Yeah. They don't understand how hard and how much pressure is when you're live on TV. You've got to be
Yeah.
careful with the ums and everything else that goes along with it
Yep.
and just try to, keep focus. It's got to be so hard.
Yeah, it's something that you develop, nobody gets it right away. I started working with a broadcast coach a few years ago, and it's really helped me develop into just a good broadcaster
Yeah.
in general, like get those fundamentals down of, what to say, when to say it, what not to say. And I watch back every single game that I call. I'm constantly listening to myself and hearing what's working, what's not working. And yeah, I think once you get those broadcast fundamentals down, it definitely helps, but it takes a lot of time. And the biggest thing in that is just getting as many reps as possible. So, that's another reason why I say yes to every opportunity because I want to continue to get better and I want to be pushed and I want to be the best that I can be. And the only way to do that is to get practice.
Yep. Absolutely. And now, when you're preparing for a match, what sort of goes into getting ready, and we'll, focus on the college aspect because I'm sure V&Ls are totally different.
A lot. Say I haven't had a team before. The first thing that I'll do is I'll sit down and make a chart for each team, which basically has all the roster information on it. So I'll put a picture of the player, their number, height, hometown, their stats from the year, their position, obviously their name. I'll put all the accolades they've gotten, stats from the last game, what they did last season. I'll after that, I kind of plug all that information in for every single player. And
Wow.
then I'll go through film and I'll look at tendencies. So hitter tendencies, setter tendencies, what their serve is like, if they line up weird in a certain rotation, all of that. And then I'll also write questions for the head coaches. So we always have a meeting with head coaches
Yep.
before games, and I'll ask about, player strategy, whatever it is. And I watch normally the last game back that the teams had. And if they've played each other, I'll usually watch that one back too. So only after all of that do I ever talk to a coach. I never go into a coach's meeting blind. Like sometimes I'll sit in meetings and people will be like, walk me through your roster. And it's like, that is not what you should be asking a
No.
coach. You need to have like specific pointed questions. So after I do all of that, then I talk to the head coaches and just get information on, what they're working on over practice over the last week, what they thought about the last game, why a certain player is doing well. And then you plug all that information into my big charts, and then we're kind of on our way. But I would say it's probably 10 to 15 hours of prep work per match. Ends up being a lot. It definitely helps once I've had teams before,
Right.
like once I've had Wisconsin for the eighth time in a season, it's like, all right, at that point, we're just updating stats because I probably had their last game. But yeah, there's a ton of legwork that goes into it. And, then you're traveling to the game, going to
Mm-hmm.
practices the day of, which are usually about an hour and a half each, talking to coaches again, then planning what you're going to talk about in the show open, which is like the 2-minute part in the beginning of a broadcast where you see us on camera. We're walking through highlights, telling you what to watch for, what could happen. So kind of planning that out. I don't want to say that's scripted, but it's somewhat
Right.
scripted. Whereas obviously nothing for the game is
No.
scripted at all. So yeah, that's kind of what goes into a show. It's a lot, and when you're
Mm-hmm.
doing that 2, 3, 4 times a week, it fills your week up pretty fast.
Absolutely. Holy cow. And, since you've started this journey, what has been your favorite match that you've called?
Oh, easily volleyball day at Nebraska. It was August 30th of 2023. They packed 92,003 people into their football stadium to watch volleyball.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember I got the call, I think it was April. So a few months beforehand that I was calling the game, and I like started crying. I was already so excited. And being at that match, I always get emotional talking about it because just walking out and seeing that many people, watching the flyover, seeing the players run out and be emotional, seeing Coach Cook emotional, like a guy who's just always stoic. It was the coolest thing in the world. And I don't think to be honest, I don't know if there's ever going to be an event that is ever going to feel like that again.
Yeah. Yeah. I had Kelly Hunter on and Jalen, and Kelly said, I looked over and there's tears just streaming down everybody's eyes. This must have
Oh
been
yeah.
such an amazing thing to be a part of.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was the same way. I remember my producer, we were lined up to film our show open. We were doing it live. A lot of times we do it taped. We had a whole pregame show. So they do the flyover. I'm sobbing, like mascara running down my face. It's like, this is after I did makeup for like an hour. And my producer hits me and is like 60 seconds to air. And I'm like, oh God. So I'm like trying to find napkins and like cleaning my face up. But it was so cool to be a part of it. And I remember during the game, at one point, I think it was after they announced the attendance, I started crying again, and I hit my producer and I was like, I'm a mess right now. And he was like, that's okay. Like, let the audience know
Yeah.
that. And it was really the only situation ever where that's probably allowed. But I remember that was really cool just to feel the same emotions as every single other person in that stadium was really cool, and everyone watching.
Yeah. And during the course of the regular season, if somebody's going to go catch a college volleyball game, where should they go watch it, just from an
Yeah.
experience standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, over the last few seasons, the Big Ten has been the best conference. The Big Ten Network covers them incredibly well. I think the producers and directors we have are just incredibly amazing. ESPN has some incredible broadcasts too. I mean, I've worked with some of the best people there. There's been a few matches on ABC over the past few seasons too. I will say any game that's on network TV. So whether that's Fox has been doing
Yeah.
games, NBC did one last year, ABC, those are games that you should always watch because the production value is going to be really high and it's just good for the sport when people watch.
Yeah.
But the top teams, like when you get matchups in the top 10 or top 5, like that's really, really high level volleyball. That's no matter what, even if it's a sweet, like it's going to be
Yeah.
exciting to watch.
If you're a fan is going to hit the road and go watch a game in person,
Oh,
where's one place that on
oh
the
yeah.
bucket list you got to check out these two places?
Yeah, you got to go to Lincoln, Nebraska. I mean, the Devaney Center is top of the top. It is the coolest place in college volleyball. They built it, I think, in 2012, I want to say. It fits somewhere around 8,500 people, and they have had, I think, almost 350 consecutive sellouts, which is the longest sellout streak in Division One athletics. So it is a blast every time you're there. It's so much fun. Madison for Wisconsin games is always a blast, mostly because those fans are just like psychotic. That's another good one. I haven't been to Gregory at Texas,
Hmm.
but I've heard that's really amazing for big matches. Another one that's like a sneaky favorite of mine is Purdue.
Okay.
It's a smaller arena. It only fits about 2,500. It's the loudest place that you will ever go. I mean, it's like it is unreal. They also sell out most of their matches. They have the best, to me, they have the best student section in the country. So yeah, like honestly, so many good places in
Yeah.
the West for sure. If you're out in Hawaii, the gym is amazing. I haven't been out there, but
Yeah.
I've heard that's a really good one too.
All right. And now, to this point, what has been some of your highlights since you've, started broadcasting for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Volleyball Day Nebraska
Yeah.
easily is one. And I will say last fall was another bucket list item and really a huge goal of mine, which was to cover an NCAA championship. And I got to do studio for ABC for that alongside Christine Williamson. And it was so cool just to be a part of a broadcast that big. And being tapped to do it, just was really, really special and a huge goal for mine over the last few seasons.
Nice. And, to this point, what's been the most rewarding part of your journey?
Oh, I think the most rewarding part is when I have, athletes stop me or coaches stop me and say like, thank you for what you're doing for the game. Because that's never, it- my goal in this has always been to try to leave volleyball better than I found it. And so, when you get that like recognition from coaches or players, or I fans tell me that a lot, it really does mean a lot because I'm doing it for them. Like I want this sport to be better than when I played, and I want the coverage to be better than when I played. Or when I have parents come up to me a lot and say like my daughter wants to do exactly what you're doing, and to be that role model for people is really cool for me because I never had that in this
Yeah.
sport. This role didn't really exist 10 years ago necessarily. Games weren't on TV very much. So it's really cool to be that role model for people too.
Yeah. And, speaking of the role model and, being a mentor, what advice would you have for that, young girl that's thinking about making this move into, broadcasting?
Yeah, I would say just like get your feet wet. Like do as many things as you can, whether that's creating content on social, going to call your high school volleyball games, like however you can find a way, either on air or in front of a camera, do it. And it doesn't matter if you have experience in that. Nobody's good right away. But just to truly get as many reps as you possibly can is the biggest thing that I would say.
Yeah. And then, what are some of the specific skills or experiences that you think helped you be successful today?
Yeah, I think, part of that is just hard work and being driven. Like nobody in this industry makes it unless you are really passionate about what you do. And that looks like a lot of different things. That's, working really hard in your prep, making sure you're, meeting the right people and constantly networking. And passion could also be like being okay with not going to some like events with your friends or like, I'm constantly missing dinners or birthday parties or whatever it is, like because I care about this so much. So I would say one of the biggest things is just being driven and being incredibly passionate about what you do. Also, over preparing. I can't emphasize that enough. The amount of time that I put into my match prep, I maybe use 10% of that.
Yeah.
But it's really important for me to know and to have just in case something comes up. So I will say over preparing is always the best way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, you never know when you have that moment to drop that piece of knowledge, like, ooh, that was a good
Yeah.
one. And then that just highlights that, no, there's nobody else who's more on their game than Emily.
Yeah, and that also comes into, a lot of people ask like how if you get nervous before a game, like what do you do? And it's so important to for me, it's like there is nobody more prepared for this job than me right now. There's no one that could sit in this seat and do a better job or be more prepared. And I think a lot of times nerves come from not feeling prepared enough or not knowing enough. And unfortunately, this is a job where like you never really do feel like you know enough. But at the same time, I know for a fact that there is no one sitting in the seat right now that is more prepared for this than
Yeah.
me.
And now, before you go live, do you have any sort of pre-live rituals or anything like that? Because like I had Shannon Windsor on, who's with Team Canada. Her thing
Yeah.
was a Diet Coke. That was her, you know. So do you need your Starbucks or Dunkin' or something like that before you go live?
I always try to get a venti mint tea with honey, mostly because like it helps my voice a little bit. Other than that, like not really. I think right before we go live, that's the only time I get slightly nervous just because we're talking like into a camera and I don't want to, fumble on what I'm
Right.
saying. So I always take some big deep breaths. Other than that, I wouldn't say I have like any specific rituals before the game.
And nobody's in your ear trying to make you laugh, or it's all very,
It
professional.
depends. I have some producers who'll definitely mess with me, but I mess with them right back. I love it. I'll honestly during games sometimes I'll have full side conversations like while play is going on with my producers, like just messing with them. And no, it's fun when you're working with people that you really enjoy.
Excellent. Now you had the opportunity to be a part of the VNLs. How cool was that?
Oh my God. VNL is like my favorite job that I work. It is so cool. I started in 2023 and like the fact that I get to travel the world to these cities that I've never been to or maybe would never go to, and I get to explore them and call the highest possible level of volleyball, like it is just insane. It's an absolute dream. Watching these athletes who, you see in the Olympics and getting to connect with them and like eat lunch with them or like bump into them in the elevator. Like it's pretty unreal. I remember like I think my first, I guess it was last year, I was in an elevator with Paolo Ganu and I was just like freaking out. I was like, this is the best thing in the world. But other than that, like going to these cities and getting to experience their culture is awesome, but also just the way that they treat volleyball. Like being in Thailand last year for the VNL women's finals, I've never seen fans that rabid about volleyball in my life. I mean, their team is fine. The Thailand isn't an amazing team.
Yeah.
But their fans, like, I mean, every single time any other national team got off the bus, like you would have thought it was the Beatles. Like it was crazy. They're handing everybody gifts. Like all the athletes were leaving with like 5 things of goodie bags just from these fans.
Oh God.
It was so cool. I've never experienced anything like that. Just so many cities that just love volleyball.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about your experience in the elevator, I had Christian Huron, who's he's the PME
Yeah.
guy. He was talking about when he was doing the VNLs, he was there just having lunch, and Taylor Averill was like, "Hey, why don't you come
Yeah.
have lunch with us?" And it was just
Yeah.
like, those are such cool moments that I don't think you get from anybody else other than the volleyball community.
It's really cool. And again, like these athletes are so normal. They're such normal people. They want to talk to you about stuff. And it's really fun being in the cities where the hosts are because you can ask them kind of like what to do. They'll give you some
Yeah.
good recs too, which has
Yeah.
been really fun.
And now, do you remember when you got the call that, hey, you're going to be a part of the VNLs?
Yeah, I had early calls with so Volleyball World actually before I got the NL job, they broadcast or had a deal with Big Ten Network, so they would put all their BTN matches on
Oh,
Volleyball World.
nice.
And they actually wanted to like kind of like up their commentary game a bit, and they had seen a game that I had done with Anne Marie Anderson, and they said we want that level of production and commentary for VNL all summer. So yeah, they called us up and yeah, that was a first year doing it in 2023. And honestly, it was so much fun because I got to do everything with Anne Marie, who is now one of like my closest friends slash coworkers slash basically my second mom. So it's really fun also doing this with someone that I love so much and love to travel with because it is a grind. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, last year it was a 6 week period and I called 50 matches. Like we're working really, really hard. So you need to be doing it with people that you like. Otherwise, your mental health can go down real fast.
Absolutely. And now, being on the international scene, you're broadcasting from different places all over the world. It's not the same crew that you have with Big Ten, probably. So,
Yeah.
how big of an adjustment was that? Like, you probably didn't have the same prep time like you did with the college side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's actually really hard to prep for VNL because you don't even know who's coming sometimes until the day of.
Right.
So you start prepping. They give you what's called like a long list roster, and I think they have 30 people on it, and they basically pick 14 from that 30. So like you kind of have an idea of who you think is going to go, but sometimes countries will also send like their B team for the
Right.
first few weeks, and so then you're like, well, great, I just prepped for a completely different team. So it's definitely hard because you don't have access to who you think is going. A lot of times teams will like release them early, or honestly what I do is I basically go in like the deep dark depths of Twitter and find accounts from countries of those teams, and like they'll say, "Oh, I saw these 15 people practicing together. This is probably the team." And I'm like, "Oh, thank God." So I like become a massive Twitter sleuth, the week
Yeah,
or two before VNL, so I have a good idea who's coming. But yeah, the prep is tough because there really isn't that much information out there. You don't have stats. I can luckily go find game film, but yeah, the prep is different. And once you get into week 2 and 3 and then the finals, it definitely is a lot more helpful because a
yeah.
lot of countries are bringing the same people. But yeah, that first week is always like, I don't know who's coming. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from a spectator standpoint, last summer, the VNLs were in Ottawa. We were able to get to catch the men. My daughter and I drove up. And it was the best experience from a fan standpoint. Just
Yeah,
nothing about it was bad.
they do an awesome job. I mean, from everything, like the in arena stuff is amazing. Obviously, I think that the streaming part of it is great, and the level of play is just it's unlike anything you've seen if you've only really watched college volleyball.
Yeah. And now, has there been what's sort of been the most memorable VNL match that you've covered?
Yeah, definitely. In Thailand last year, for the VNL finals, it was the semifinal between Brazil and Japan, and it was just the greatest volleyball match I'd ever seen. I mean, it was a 5-set thriller. It was the best defensive match, hands down, of
Mm-hmm.
anything I've ever even witnessed. Japan is the scrappiest team in the world. I mean, they're not very tall. They pick everything up, and it was so fun to watch because Brazil is this powerhouse. They've won multiple gold
Mm-hmm.
medals. So many players on that team have so many medals to their name, and it was just really cool to see Japan pull that one out in a game they were not supposed to win at all, and just the defense was so much fun. I'd never seen anything like that.
All right. And now, seeing these, amazing people, these players up close, any particular player that really stands out is like, holy cow, that guy can jump or that girl can hit the ball.
Yeah, I love watching Gabby from Brazil.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like makes you love watching volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
She's so energetic. She can take over a game. I mean, she's also just so good. She's,
Yeah.
the best outside or one of the best outsides in the world. She's been like that for about the last 10 years. If you want a player to watch, Gabby from Brazil is the one to go to.
She is a fiery person. Holy
Yeah.
cow. Yeah.
She's awesome. And then I would say the second one, Brenda Castillo, she's the libero for the Dominican. I mean, to me, I think she's the best libero in the world. She is so much fun. I mean, nothing falls around her. She flies around. She's one of those fiery bros that I just am obsessed with.
Nice. Now, was there a particular match or player or moment that you step back and think, wow, I really get to do this for a living?
Yeah, I think I remember calling the VNL final this past year because that really stuck out to me because I was like, dang, this could be the exact players, like this could be the Olympic final. And that was really cool for me, calling players like Paola Ganu, and um I knew that, Italy was going to make a deep run in the Olympics, and obviously they went on to win it, pretty handily, and which is kind of how they went through the VNL as well. But just watching that team and being like, dang, I get to call this team that, in a month is going to be in the Olympics. Like that was really cool for me, to be able to do that.
All right. You talked earlier about the travel, the lot of travel that you do with this job that you have. What are some tips or things you've figured out to sort of, keep you leveled mentally, healthy, and also, eating right. Make sure that, because on
So
the road
hard.
it's so hard.
It's so hard. One thing I do is I make sure I have to work out on the road. I always pack one, if not two, workout outfits. And usually the first thing I do when I get to the hotel is go work out if I can. And then usually the morning of a game, I try to as well. And I was much better about it this year. But yeah, getting workouts in is huge, even if that's like just going outside on a walk for a half hour. That's a big thing. And then I think just trying to eat as healthy as I can. It's not easy, but making sure I'm like eating vegetables or like making smart decisions and not just like going down to the hotel bar and grabbing 2 glasses of wine and a burger. Like I,
Right.
I can't really be doing that anymore.
No. So I got a couple of fun questions. So I had Eric
Yeah.
on a while ago. Eric showed you. Him and Taylor have this thing. What's the toughest position in volleyball? So
Okay.
Emily, what is the toughest position in volleyball?
For sure, a setter. They have to manage not only their job, which is near impossible, but everyone else on the court. Like everyone's looking to you in every moment. to come through. And if you mess up your touch, then everything kind of goes to trash. So yeah, I think setters is incredibly difficult. And you don't really get any of the no one's looking, you don't get a lot of the recognition, I will
Right.
say.
Yep. Absolutely. And now, when Christian came on, he said when he was on VNLs, he started doing the question about what's the easiest position. I said, "Oh, that's a good one." So, Emily, what's the easiest position in volleyball?
Oh God, that's a good question. I want to say I feel like either a right side or a libero, but
Yeah.
because I was a libero, I feel like I have to say it right side because literally your only job is to hit and block.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean serve, but you have nothing else to do besides go up and hit.
Right.
Like
You
your
don't
job
have to
is to get
pass. That's
out.
like,
You're not fast.
right.
I think like yeah, definitely an opposite. And obviously they get the most recognition and people say they're the best players in the world, but I do not agree with that. I think most opposites are the best hitters in the world, like a Paola Ganu or a Melissa Vargas, but no, to me, no, that's you just hit. All you do is hit.
Right. Yep. And now, if you could cover any sporting event in the world, what sporting event are you covering?
The Olympics for sure. Have always wanted to do that. I'm trying to find a way to get out to LA, and do that as well. So definitely the Olympics.
All right. Did you hear that, NBC? You got to get Emily for LA 28. 28. All right. And away from volleyball, when you're not traveling, what are some of the things you enjoy?
Oh my gosh, sitting on my couch, doing nothing. I just moved into an apartment in Chicago that is like pretty close to the lake. So getting out for a good lake walk, is my favorite thing in the world when it's nice out.
All right. And, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you coming on. But before I let you go, like with past guests, I look for you to recommend somebody in your volleyball circle who you think would have a good story to come on and share.
Ooh, my volleyball circle. Mechella Chester. She's one of my good friends in the industry. She's the NCAA digital reporter, and did sidelines for a regional last year for ESPN. And she's a grinder. She's doing sidelines as well for League One this season.
Cool.
I mean, she's awesome. She's a cool person, and I think people don't hear from her a lot because she's mostly just digital. But she's awesome. I love her.
All right. We'll definitely get her on. And I see behind you, you had the PVF All Star. How was that
Yeah.
experience?
Oh my God, it was so much fun. No one really knew what to expect going into it. I think, I don't want to say it was thrown together because it was absolutely not, but I think everyone, even the players, were like, we'll see how this goes. Like, we don't really know. And to have that match on CBS on network was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
To cover that was really cool as well. But it was a sold out crowd, which was incredible in Indy. There were 7,500 people there, a lot of celebs in the building. It was one of the coolest events that I've covered just because it was such a celebration for volleyball,
Right.
which was really special.
Yeah. Especially for college volleyball, because you had so many college coaches there.
Yeah.
It was so cool to see.
It was great. I mean, it was also just really fun. There was like a VIP event after, and I got to catch up with so many, college coaches and a lot of players that I hadn't seen in a while, and just people around the sport, which was really fun.
Nice. Well, Emily, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It was really great to meet you, and hopefully we'll see you in the Olympics at 2028.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.